channel. So you can go back and look at it on the YouTube channel if you would like to. So, good morning, everyone. We're going to make a start. We're going to do HR, how to deal with mental health conditions in the workplace. So, when it works. A minute ago, Kirsty. There we go. A minute ago, it was pressing stuff and I didn't want it to, and now it wouldn't let it. So, this is normally the part where I introduce my lovely colleague, David Hudson. However, for a second month in a row, he is off with helping our clients. He's doing a training session for one of our clients. So, I have to forgive him. And I'm afraid you're going to have to listen to me rambling on for the next sort of 25 or so minutes by myself. My name is Charlotte, for those who've not met me. I am the owner and director of the HR department up here in Coventry. Work very closely with David Hudson and the team and have done for the last kind of 18 months or so. We do these little kind of bite-sized webinars to just cover off a range of topics that we think are useful, helpful, practical to HR people, to managers, to MDs, to directors, to anybody who has employees, basically. So what we will be covering today. Now, I'm going to try and do hyper speed on this because we picked a really chunky topic, which is mental health. So we have a lot to cover. So hopefully through these next slides, the next, like I say, 20, 25 minutes, we will go through what the responsibilities are as an employer, because although we always think of like, oh my goodness, someone's got mental health, we need to kind of bow down and there's a lot we have to do. There's a lot of myths around it. So what do we actually need to do? How can we support people without overstepping the mark or starting to diagnose people is another one. How are we handling performance absence and adjustments? Because those things may still need to come into play. How do we protect other people and the business? It needs to be a good balancing act. And then hopefully by the end, we will reduce some of the fear of getting it wrong. I will also caveat, those of you who've been to my previous webinars, I seem to caveat every webinar in the same way of this is a short webinar, okay? This is not every single thing in minute detail. I was talking to Kirsty before we started that actually I could probably do a whole day session on all the different sort of sections of mental health. You know, neurodiversity is a huge thing at the moment. There's a lot going on. More people being diagnosed with anxiety, with depression. You know, mental health is more diagnosed because it's more recognized and more accepted within society. And today I'm doing I made a joke earlier, it's not just top level. This is like in the sky looking down top level, because if I tried to cover specifics for every condition, we would be here. I mean, you'd probably be here until next week with me talking about it. I do welcome any questions, and I will try and get to them at the end. But if anything's got a burning question, please stick your hand up or come off mute. I will try and get to them. Obviously, you know, please be respectful of other people. Please be respectful of confidentiality. And if there is something, especially if you are a client of ours or would like to be a client of ours, we can always take these kind of out of the webinar and have a separate conversation. I've got some of the team here who would be more than happy to have a chat with you and to set something up so we can talk in more depth and more specifically and more personal details. So with that said, we will move on. So managing mental health within the in the workplace. So good management and mental health issues will help us with employee well-being. That's not just the employee we are dealing with, that is everybody else, because although we would like to live in a perfect world where other people are not affected by other people, and everybody just comes to work in their professional business mode and just gets on with the job, does the job 100% and then leaves. Sadly, we all come to work with baggage. We all come to work with, you know, stuff that we could leave, we would like to leave at home, but it comes with you. You know, mental health is one of those things that you can't just, you know, shake it off at the door and then leave it and pick it back up later, unfortunately. And it affects the person and it affects the other people around them. You know, we are part of a team, and a good team working together, if one person is not doing as well, can have an impact. Lower absence levels, you know, that's the ideal, really, is that we help people to get into a place where being at work is not detrimental to their mental health, or if they have a mental health condition, you know, we are supporting them to be in work as much as they can be. which it lowers that absence level. It reduces that legal risk as well, because the last thing we want is for our employee to feel that we've not supported them and not taking care of them, and that they feel that there was more we could be doing. And they have, everybody has the right to make that claim to an employment tribunal. Well, not unfortunately, it is a legal right. But even if people have only come for an interview, even before the interview process, if you've been to one of my webinars last year, I was explaining that there's actually been a recent case as well where a man was banned from making tribunal claims because he was going through adverts and applying for jobs he was massively unsuited for. And then when asked why he was when they said that he was massively unsuited for it, he was then making claims of mental health, of discrimination, of age discrimination, race discrimination, you name it, he was picking something and going with it. So that's where that legal risk comes from. And overall, the stronger team trust. If your team know that if they share something with you, you will support them, you get that back. We can't be treating employees as numbers constantly because they react in that way. So let's move on. So what have you got as an employer? So these are things that we must be doing. Obviously, we've got this list to work through, but there's no hard and fast rules on some of this. And at the bottom, so I'll go through this, but at the bottom, I'm just going to jump to that bit, is reasonableness. Now, there is not a legal definition of reasonableness. And this is going to be, I feel like sometimes we should do bingo cards for the things that I say all the time in these webinars, but reasonable and reasonableness are going to be one of the main things that comes up, because that is the litmus test at tribunal, is have we done everything as an employer to help somebody with a mental health condition, with a disability, with, whatever this might be, in this case, mental health is what we're dealing with, have we done all that we reasonably could? And if the answer is yes, then in theory, we are protected from tribunal, we are protected by the law. If we have not, then it becomes a grey area of why have we not, what more could we have done? So we are looking at safe working environment, treating people fairly, reasonable adjustment. We're going to talk a bit more about those. Managing absence appropriately. Again, this is not to say that people with a mental health condition have a kind of get out of jail free card, that they can be absent as much as they want to, but there needs to be a balance. And we need to go back to what is reasonable in that situation. And also confidentiality, because sometimes it's easy when you're working with a team and everyone's very stressed out and they're like, oh, well, why is so and so not pulling their weight? Why is she always off? Why is she this? Why is she that? It's quite easy to say, oh, well, you realize that she's got depression, or we've got this going on, and it's not done out of any malicious reasons, but sometimes it just kind of comes out, and that's unfair to that other person if they don't want to share a diagnosis. They are not duty bound to share a diagnosis, especially with their colleagues. For some people, mental health is very open. People will tell you they're on medication, people will tell you what's going on with them, and that's fabulous. But some people, it's very personal. It's very, it's still, even in nowadays in society, can be a source of a lot of shame and embarrassment for people. And people will not want to share that. They may not even want to share it with you as their manager or as their HR person. So when they do share these things, we need to make sure that we are keeping that confidential. And again, I'm going to keep rattling on about it. We are thinking at all times about what is reasonable. We need to do those 4 or 5 points that are there. Those are our key responsibilities as the employer. But actually, what is reasonable? So an example that always gets used is, not necessarily relevant for mental health, but within a disability kind of umbrella is, if you are in a building and your offices are upstairs and you don't own the building, so couldn't put a lift in, and the person is, uses a wheelchair or has, different mobility needs, is it reasonable to try and put a lift in? That's not reasonable. Is it reasonable to hire an office downstairs they can use? It's probably more reasonable. So that's what we're thinking about with reasonableness is, could you do it? And if you couldn't, why couldn't you? So we will move on. So let me have a quick look of copy. There we go. Right. So how are we going to support people without overstepping? So I'm going to go through the don'ts first, because I think the top don't is a really big one. We can't don't diagnose medical conditions. I'm not a doctor. I assume none of you guys are doctors out there. And yeah, you can say, well, I know somebody who has condition A and they don't behave like this, or I know I've met somebody, my auntie had condition A and she wasn't like this. But unfortunately, everybody is a different person. And what tribunal case law has shown is that we just need to have a reasonable belief about that person's condition. So I will use autism as an example. Obviously, neurodiversity is a huge umbrella, and I always say that we could cover this again till the cows come home. I'm not going to, but we'll just use it as an example. The person may exhibit signs, no recognized signs of autism within the workplace. They may come to you and say, I think I have it, but I don't have a diagnosis. Currently, the wait, when I had a quick Google yesterday, the wait time, it's nice and vague, is on the NHS is between 8 months and 3 years. So you may get lucky and it's an 8-month wait. You may get very unlucky and it's a 3-year wait. So what tribunal law has shown us is if that person is exhibiting symptoms, or not symptoms, but characteristics that would be in keeping with that diagnosis, they don't need a piece of paper, a recognized form to say person A has autism or is on the autistic spectrum for you to make reasonable adjustments. So I've seen this a couple of times with clients where somebody's actually come to them with ADHD and says, I believe I've got ADHD. You know, what I've seen online has resonated with me. And I'm not a big fan of, I diagnosed myself on TikTok, but that is becoming more and more common. And actually, the law says just because they don't have that formal diagnosis is not a reason for us not to make reasonable adjustments, especially because if these are reasonable adjustments to help the person stay in work, help the person be in work, help the person be more productive, more efficient, why would we not do those things? And just, it's a little bit of I think, an old-fashioned way to say, well, no, you need to bring me a piece of paper that tells me what's wrong with you before I'll help you. So let's go to the do's. We'll go to the positives. So listen and show empathy. I spoke earlier that for some people it's deeply shameful, not just embarrassing, but a real physical shame in having to admit there's something wrong, in having to admit to, you know, potentially somebody who they look up to, somebody they respect, somebody who is their boss or their line manager, and say, there's something going on and I need help. You know, none of us really like going and asking for help. And I think when people, because there is that stigma to having mental health and being seen as mental or seen as crazy or seen as a problem, people don't want to do it. So listening, showing empathy, focus on the work impact. So like I just talked about with the ADHD and the diagnosis and stuff, we're only focused on work. If this person can't get into work on time, that is an issue. So we need to look at, what ways can we help them get into work? Do we need to change their start time? Do we need to look at different options? You know, if it impacts on work, if they are staying up till 3 a.m, as long as they're coming into work, it doesn't really matter. We probably want them to be more focused, but we need to draw the line somewhere. And there is only so much that we can do and help and support with. And so we need to draw that line to, if it's impacting work, that's where we need to focus first. And actually, if that person then seeks treatment, medication, therapy, whatever it looks like, it will help in all elements of their life and not just work. Signpost support. So I have copped out a little bit by putting HR in there, because if you are HR and you're not sure where to go, you need to kind of follow the next steps. But actually, as HR, those of you who are within the HR sphere, as it were, we came into this, hopefully, anyway, if you're like me, to help people and to solve problems and to look after employees. And so actually, maybe you can just go back to that first bullet point and be someone who can listen and show empathy to that person. And we've always got things like occupational health. We've always got, there are many resources out there. Obviously, it depends what the person's condition is, but there are a lot of resources for things like neurodiversity within the workplace on a separate kind of similar vein as well. There are things like if somebody is diagnosed with cancer, there are places like Macmillan and other places that can help with supporting that person in work. Mind is a wonderful charity. They do a lot on their website about helping people with different mental health conditions. be in work, stay in work, get into work. So, always use the free resources you've got available. And then in EAP, an employee assistance program is great. That you may well have other things as well, like insurances or health benefits, where they can go and get counseling sessions. They can go and get quicker diagnosis for ADHD. You see what they can tap into. And obviously it goes without saying, but we're saying it anyway, is keep conversations professional. You, again, we're going to jump straight into the don'ts. We can't diagnose stuff. So just listen to the information you are given as it is given. You can have your own personal opinions on it, but that person is giving you information. So we need to, for the most part, just take it and go with it. We're not going to pressure them for personal details. Like I said, keep saying, some of this is very, very personal to people and it feels very hard to share. So we don't need the ins and outs of their medical condition, every single thing that's wrong with them. We just need broad strokes in some cases. And then don't promise get outcomes you can't guarantee. So it may well be that this person is, just because they have mental health condition, they may well, with some support, be able to be a wonderful, productive, useful member of the team. It may be that the job is just not for them. I've seen people who go into jobs and for whatever reason, the job is not suited to them. And that is okay. It's not a nice feeling, but actually, not every job fits every person and we can't treat it as such. So I realise that we are already on 20 past and I've got a few slides to get to because I talk too much again. So we're going to get through this as quickly as possible. So absence and performance fairly. So we need to think about consistency, documents, communication, early support. So what do those things look like? So hopefully you're doing that for every single person, whether they have shared they've got a mental health condition or not. What it looks like in terms of mental health stuff is holding the return to work conversations. Hopefully you are having those anyway. If you're not, I think it's even more important where somebody has shared they have a mental health condition, because we need to keep that regular check-in with them. Review absence patterns is going to be a huge one. So where somebody has a disability, not just mental health, we have an obligation to make adjustments. Again, reasonable adjustments, my bingo word for the day. Make those reasonable adjustments. Now, what that normally would look like is actually, if you have a trigger point of 3 absences within 3 months, say, maybe that person's trigger point is 6 absences in 3 months, because you are accepting that because of their condition, they are naturally going to have more absences just by default. And some people come to me and we're like, oh my goodness, how do we pick a number? How do we know? How do we work it out? And as a sort of a general rule, not all the time, but a general rule is to look back on the last year. How many absences did that person have in a year? So if in 12 months they had 20, for example, we could divide that down into quarters, or however you want to divide that down. And maybe that is the number that we stick to. So instead of saying, you can only have 3 in 3 months, we say you can have 5 in 3 months, and then we start the process. So it's just looking at that. Where can we be reasonable? That's really simple, really easy. It's based on historical data that we can look at. And it's quite quick to implement. We could do it almost instantly. That's not to say they're not going to go through an absence process, because we do need them to be in work fulfilling their contract, but there is some structure to how we're doing it. Support options. At every return to work meeting I would have for that person, I would talk about, this is what we've got in place. How is what we've got working? Is there anything else we could do? Do we need to adjust what we've already got? Do we need to try something new? Because clearly, again, they may not be in the right job, but actually, if we've done everything we can and we're being as adaptable and reasonable, bingo card again, as we can be, then that is what we need to do from a legal point of view. And then follow organisational policies. I know it goes without saying, but we're not trying to rewrite the book for somebody just because they've shared they've got a mental health condition. And I think this is the bit where managers especially, start to get a bit wary and a bit afraid, because they're like, oh God, well, I just need to let them do whatever, and I'm not going to do any disciplinaries for absence, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do that. And actually, first of all, that's not fair on other people. Second of all, that's not fair on that person, because if we're just going to let things roll and roll and roll and roll, all that's going to happen is this is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. And actually, if they are not able to, because they are not well enough to fulfill their contract, unfortunately that they can't stay in that job. And that's a whole other conversation that we can talk about another time. But the reality is that some people just aren't suited to certain jobs, especially if they have a mental health condition. But we need to have done all these other things first to make sure that we are being as fair as possible. And the same, I talked a bit about absence, the same with performance. You know, if we are setting certain people KPIs, then we need to look at how are we adjusting other people's KPIs where they have a mental health condition. Again, not in the same vein, but there was a recent employment tribunal case where a person was made redundant and they were not happy with this because they said that their dyslexia was not taken into account. And when they looked at the scoring, this person scored very, very low on written communication. And it's like, well, yeah, she's dyslexic. It's not going to be the best. But they hadn't made a reasonable adjustment. And a reasonable adjustment would be to alter her score or give her an average score from everybody else, or to ignore that section and look at the other section. So that's what we're thinking about when we're looking at performance as well. Okay, what time we're on? Oh my goodness. Okay. We may well have covered some of these. So considering adjustments. So these are some really easy ones that you can implement, and that they kind of have no impact on, in theory, on other people. They just would be supportive of this person. So temporary flexible hours. If somebody's on new medication, is making it really hard to get out of bed, could you just let them start 15 minutes later and finish 15 minutes later? Really easy, harms nobody else, would help them while their medication settles down. Adjusted duties. Again, that's a whole broad spectrum, but could you adjust things? This is not to say that we're taking key components out of their job, but could we be more flexible with them? Could we maybe have somebody who supports them with them? Maybe we have two people instead of one person doing it. Phase returns to work when they're coming back. Nice, easy, lovely, a nice traditional one. We ease people back into what they're doing. And then additional equipment or support. So there are a few places that can help with things like this. So what's it called? Fit for Work, I think, is one of the places, who are Access to Work, that's the one, who are able to provide for the employee to go through the employer funding so that they can get additional equipment, they could get taxis to work. In the case of somebody who's maybe neurodivergent or has other things going on, that they are able to get maybe a computer program that would help, or an app that would help. Or for people, I've seen stuff for people who are colorblind, who can get different screens and different filters and stuff for their laptop. So it's another way to help, because there is a line to be drawn on where something is expensive and where something is cost prohibitive. And we talked about the extreme version of adding a lift to a building. Now, that's not expensive, that is cost prohibitive. But actually, getting somebody, for example, paying for some filters or a program on their computer to help with the screens. People who have neurodiversity quite often have issues with lights and stuff. And if that is, more expensive than not paying for it, it is just expensive, and it's a one-off cost that may help that person, as opposed to cost prohibitive. We should cover. Not every adjustment's possible. Okay, we just talked about that. Wonderful. Look at that. So you can see I'm breezing through. So we need to balance out operational requirements for the employee needs. And I think the real big one is sometimes we do need to have a bit of a kind of a cost benefit kind of analysis going on. And actually, if it's a one-off payment and it is expensive, but you only need to do it once and it would really help that employee, it's probably worth doing. Whereas if it's maybe expensive and we're going to have to be doing it every 3 or 4 months, then we start needing to weigh up what is reasonable. And what I will say is, if you are a big business, we have quite a few up here in Coventry, places like Jaguar Land Rover, Severn Trent, those sorts of places. Your idea of expensive and as SMEs idea of expensive are going to be very, very different. So the onus is going to be more on the bigger companies to provide things than it is on the smaller ones. Because again, if you are a 3-person operation and you're not making lots and lots and lots of money, what is expensive to you, again, is a whole different vocabulary. So we need to just be balancing things. And again, back to the key word, it's always got to be reasonable. So everyone, hold on to your hats. We've only got a couple more slides to go. So protecting the business and the people. So we're looking on the good side. If we can get things in place, they improve employee well-being, they improve the team morale, they improve productivity. Overall, having an employee who feels supported at work, who's had a couple of adjustments made to help them be in work, is always going to be more productive, is always going to be happier. And if you've got one person who can say, do you know what? I was having a really rough time and they were great about it, that you can't buy loyalty like that. But it spreads to the rest of the team because people talk, they naturally will talk. Whereas if you don't do anything, that person will probably leave, and before they'll leave, they'll tell every single other person in the team they couldn't give a monkey's about me. They don't care about mental health. They don't care about the fact that I'm struggling. I'm just a number on a page, and they don't want to spend any money or spend any time helping me. Not going to go well. Not great for team morale. So we're looking at making clear processes and fair decisions because, again, back to thinking about if it goes to tribunal as a discrimination case, we want to show we have been fair, we have been reasonable, and that we have actually supported that person. I think a lot of it will go a long way, is just sympathy and empathy for a person. We sometimes are too busy thinking about the number and what we're trying to get through in our day, when actually we are dealing with people and every single person is unique and every single person will need different things. And sometimes just being a sympathetic ear is what that person needs. Sometimes just a little slack, a little leeway goes a long way. But if we don't do those things, the risks are discrimination claims, I've been talking about the whole way through, for disability and things like that, it's unlimited. So the amount that you can claim is absolutely huge. I always use the example that there was, I think the biggest one was something like £40 million was paid out to someone who was a victim of the Grenfell Tower incident, and they had PTSD from that and ended up losing their job. And because of the extremity of what happened, yes, they had PTSD, but actually the place they were working for really did not help them or support them after such a serious incident. And also I popped on there at the bottom because we often forget it, team conflict. We've got one person who is seemingly doing whatever they like, it's always going to breed bad feeling in other people. So we need to be showing that we're fair but also supportive. Okay, hopefully we're slightly reducing the fear of getting things wrong. We're following everything that we've done today. So document stuff, take advice. If it's not from HR, it needs to be occupational health. We are not medical doctors. We have the policies for a reason, but we can be flexible with them. And we've talked about being fair. And I put in that little box just a reminder to take away that the reality is that perfect decisions are rare. You may have a situation where you make some decisions and the person is happy and it works and it's brilliant and it's joyful and we all get to skip and sing and be really happy. However, sometimes they don't work out. The world is not perfect. But you need to be able to show, using those things down, those 4 different bits down the side, if you've done all of those things, you've done as much as you can. And sometimes things don't work out, and sometimes people aren't happy with those decisions. But the reality is we can only do the best we can do. If we are, bingo word again, if we are being as reasonable and fair as possible, you've done as much as you can, is the reality. There we go. So we're nearly there. I'm only slightly late. So hopefully you're going to be able to take away understanding a bit where your responsibilities lie, a bit as an employer and also just as a general human being. We are listening, supporting as appropriate, and sometimes that's all that's needed. We need to manage absence and performance consistently, but also there is flexibility in that. And actually what's right for somebody who doesn't have a mental health condition versus somebody who does and is really struggling are going to be very different. Their needs can be different, and what we should be measuring them on is going to need to be different. And that doesn't mean to say it's permanent. There may be a temporary need. We need to consider reasonable adjustments. All reasonable adjustments. Anything can be a reasonable adjustment. Sitting in a different location in the office can be a reasonable adjustment. Changing a light bulb so it's a bit lower or a bit brighter can be a reasonable adjustment. We don't always have to think about spending hundreds or thousands of pounds on equipment or this or that, or sending the person to counselling or doing whatever. Sometimes it can just be as simple as letting them come in a little bit later in the day, or even a little bit earlier in the day, or moving their seat, or all of those things, and ask for support where needed. So some of you are clients, which is amazing, which means you already have access to our team. And our team, the great thing about the HR department is we are a huge network across the country. So you may never have dealt with this before. The person you speak to may have some knowledge, but may not have dealt with it specifically. But we always have the wider group who can help and can help with the specifics. So you are never alone and you are never defeated, is the takeaway. So I realize we are a few minutes late, so apologies. Like I said, it was a very, very chunky topic. I do have a question. I do have something in the chat. Oh, won't let me look at it. Oh, okay. It said I had a. Oh, thanks, Michelle. Lovely. Okay. Has anybody got any questions? I realize, apologies, I have rambled on. Hopefully it was useful today, but if anyone does have any questions.
Hi, I have a quick question, please.
Yeah, of course, go for it.
Hi, I'm Joe. Just
Hi,
just
Joe.
a quick one, really. How much should we document? For example, if we have someone that is working at home, they need to take frequent breaks. They've kind of asked, "Can I just take an hour?" Do we need to document all of this? How do I go about doing that?
Yeah, so do you mean as in documenting that they've asked to take the breaks or documenting the breaks?
Actually, if they're just saying I'm not coping very well at the moment, can I just
Okay.
take an hour, go and have a little lie down, whatever? And I say, yeah, absolutely, go and do that. Should I be making a note of that every single time?
Um, that is a very good question. I think it would depend how regularly it's happening. I
Okay.
think if it's once or twice a week, I personally would be tempted not to bother. If it's a daily occurrence or even more than once a day, I think I would start making a note because again, they have a contract to fulfill and there is a balance and it is a very fine line to walk. And obviously you don't want to be making more jobs for yourself, having to, clock watch for an employee, but actually if they're having to take significant breaks on top of, I assume they're already having their regular lunch breaks and stuff,
Yeah.
that suggests to me that something's not working. So maybe if they've changed medication, maybe we do that for a week or so. And how do they feel? If it's still happening, I think that's something they need to talk to their GP or their consultant about because actually that's quite impactful on their day. And it might actually be more impactful than previously. So I think I think some of it is play it by ear, Joe, and
Okay.
see. I think when it becomes an issue or when it starts to become too frequent, that's when I would start just making a note of it and also having a conversation with that person of previously you were having like the odd break and now it's like every single day. What's changed? What's happened? What's gone on? Is there anything else we can do for you? Have you spoken to your doctor? Those kind of things, just to see what's going on.
Okay. And under this mental health kind of banner, do we
Yeah.
include menopause or do we treat that very separately?
That's a good one. I mean, yes. So menopause is becoming more and more talked about, I guess, is the thing. So it does have some elements to um within a disability category because where all this falls is from a big umbrella of what's a disability. And for some people, yes, it may well do, especially things like brain fog, the forgetfulness. They can have an impact on somebody's day-to-day life, their working life. If you lose your train of thought mid-sentence or you forget a detail in a meeting, that is very impactful. And I think there isn't, yeah, again, it's on a more of a case-by-case basis is the reality. It's
Okay.
not automatically a disability because a disability is something that impacts somebody's day-to-day for a significant period of time, but it can easily become one. But again, that's back to I would be having those conversations with people, seeing what are they doing to help themselves. That doesn't necessarily need to be the GP and HRT, but are they, there's all sorts of magnesium, there's all sorts of different things that people can take to support themselves, lifestyle changes. I know somebody who drinks green tea instead of black tea now, all those sorts of things can help the person support themselves as well.
Thank you.
But hopefully that helps.
So
Again,
I, Oh, sorry, I have a question. It's Martin.
Hello, Martin. Yeah, go for it. Please do.
What is it? Do you have any suggested wording to explain to other staff for somebody who's having an extended period of time off because they're struggling and they've been signed off by the GP? And you said obviously it's a confidential matter, and I'm struggling to find out what words to use. Really, I mean, it is almost, other people are obviously noticing their absence and asking where's such an, is there any suggested wording that you can offer?
I mean, if the person hasn't said they're happy for you to share anything, I would just say person X is off for the foreseeable future. Full stop.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, you could, if you feel like the team need a bit more, I would talk to the person first and say, what are you happy to share? What, if they're happy for you to say that they are struggling a little bit and that they will be back, then that's fine. But I think sometimes people want too much information. All they need to know, this person is off. We're hoping that they'll come back in April, for example. Full stop.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so easy to overshare because you want to just explain things, but actually sometimes just they're not in, they will be back in the future. Full stop is enough.
Okay. No, we'll go with that. Okay, thank you, Charlotte. That's great. Thank you. Cheers.
Any more for any more? Nope. Lovely. Okie dokie. Well. Oh my goodness. Technology has failed me, Kirsty. There we go. So, like I said, this is the last little bit is we are an outsourced HR provider. We deal with mental health as well as a whole plethora of other things as part of our every single day. Like I said, we are part of a wider network as well. So there is never a question that we can't answer. And, if you are one of our clients, then you already have access to this brilliant service, to our, wonderful consultants who can help you. If you're not, we are always open to conversations, whether it's on a pay-as-you-go basis or on a retained basis. And we do so much more than mental health. There's a whole list there of stuff. But actually, if you've got somebody who's got a mental health condition, any of those things start to come into play. So that is everything from me today. Thank you so much for your patience. I appreciate we have run 10 minutes over, but there was a lot to cover, even trying to keep it brief. And it was thank you for people who ask questions, because honestly, it's so helpful to have some kind of real life experiences to chat about. Like I said, if you do have anything you want to kind of talk about offline or in a different online setting even, please reach out to us. We have more webinars coming up. The wonderful Kirsty is in charge of our mailing list for that. So if you want to get on the mailing list for our other how-tos, please do, because we try to do one every single month. Our next one coming up next month is about AI and whether or not it's a friend or a foe within the HR world. So sign up for those. And that is everything from me. Thank you so much for your patience. I appreciate it. It was a little bit of a long one, but hopefully you have all got something out of it. So thank you very much. And
thank you, Charlotte. That's great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye bye. Have a great day. Should we start recording, Kate?